Inside New Orleans Sports with Eric Asher is underwritten by...
At Villere's Florist, we deliver the magic of flowers 7 days a week to the North Shore and South Shore in the New Orleans area. Whether it's for birthday parties, baby celebrations, Villere's provides colorful floral displays for all. With a store full of fresh-cut flowers, exotic tropical flowers, orchids, roses, and even fruit baskets, our goal is to make your vision a reality. Villere's Florist, proudly serving Louisiana since 1969.
Dave Miette Insurance Agency. Auto, home, flood, business, 504-556-0809. Dave Miette, INSagency.com.
For over 48 years, Southern Tires and Auto Repair has provided services across the New Orleans metro area. Southern Tires offers a range of tires for all vehicles and ATVs. We also have a full suite of auto repair options, including brake repair, rim repair, custom exhaust, steering and suspension, tire siping, and so much more. Southern Tires and Auto Repair, 2550 Hickory Avenue in Metairie.
C&C Drugs is a family-owned pharmacy that's been serving Southeast Louisiana for over 50 years. Whether you need help taking care of an elderly family member, a growing child, or even a pet, C&C provides patient-centered care for your entire family. C&C Drugs, large enough to serve you, small enough to know you. Locations in Mandeville and Araby.
Good afternoon and welcome to another edition of Inside New Orleans Sports. I am your host, Eric Asher. Over the next hour, we'll do as we always do. We'll cover all the home teams for you. Saints, LSU, Tulane, hope to get the Pelicans, and one of the best we have in all the state. Jeff Duncan of the New Orleans Times-Picayune and Fox 8 Sports is our guest today. Jeff, welcome back to the show. How you been, my friend?
It's good to be back, Eric, and it's been too long.
Yes, it has been. But before we get started, tell the folks about Times-Picayune. You're doing stuff with Fox 8 as well. I saw your commentary this week, another great commentary. Tell us all about it.
Yeah, I'll tell you the thing that really we're getting a lot of positive responses to is our Saints newsletter. Mm-hmm. It's our team with Luke Johnson and Rod Walker and myself. It's a really easy way to follow the team because it comes right into your email inbox. Yes. You get all of our coverage, and that subscription list is all free, but it's up to over 40,000 fans right now. So that's really something I would highly recommend if you get a chance. It's an easy way to follow just our Saints coverage. We have a lot of other newsletters, but that's one in particular. And then just diving in full time, trying to get out to as many Tulane games as I can. That's changed dramatically. Yes. I know we're going to talk Tulane, but that's one thing that I'm very excited about last weekend, getting out to that big game against Ole Miss. Really fun for me. I live uptown, so I walk to the game. I get to walk through Audubon Park on the way through campus, and I thought, where else can you do this? I get to enjoy this incredible, uptown environment and atmosphere for a big game.
Yeah, I'm so jealous. I grew up uptown, Webster Magazine, and we did that all the time. We took our bikes, we walked to Tulane Stadium, the old Tulane Stadium back in the day, and now with Yeoman there, it's the opportunity to do that again. It's a great atmosphere. And before we'll get into this a little bit later, but I saw they put something out this week. Gary Smith wrote about it that they're going to limit the student section to 4,000 tickets, and these kids now have to apply for the tickets early. Who would have thought that Tulane, who couldn't get any of their kids, their students to the game a couple years ago, is now having to put parameters on who can go to the game, and now it's a lottery for your tickets.
Yeah, and I talked to Troy Dannon about that exact thing. He said it takes a while. There's so many competing interests here, as we all know in New Orleans. There's so many things to do. It took them a while to make Tulane football a thing to do, and now it is the thing to do for these students. And you're right. I can remember, for so many years, the students would leave at halftime, start going out to all the bars uptown, the parties or whatever. That doesn't happen anymore. I mean, they're there through the entire game, and there's students lined up to get in. So this is something new for Tulane University, and it's kind of cool to see.
Right, and I'll find it interesting to see because, again, the Ole Miss fans that came here last week had to buy a season ticket package, from what I understand. So there'll be a lot of tickets on the secondary market. How those tickets will be snapped up, and will it affect games later on in the season in terms of attendance?
Yeah, and the other thing that I think's really exciting if you're a Tulane fan is, Troy said they've basically stacked the future schedules with at least one of those Power 5 opponents. So you're going to get to see Northwestern come in. I think Mississippi State's coming in. Kansas State comes in. Iowa State. Duke is going to come here. Those are perfect opponents for Tulane.
Yeah,
they're big name, from big conferences, but yet they're competitive with Tulane. I think Tulane's going to win their share of those games.
Yeah.
But I think it really adds to the home schedule.
Yeah, it really is. Things have really changed, and we're going to get into a little bit more of that, obviously, a little bit later on in the program. But we start with Saints, 16-15 winners over Tennessee, and of course a game in which I think they showed some things. A game in which, again, maybe they showed that there needs to be some improvement in different areas. I'll toss it to you. Some of the things that stuck out to you: good, bad, ugly.
Yeah, look, I was encouraged more than I was discouraged.
Me too.
I think Derek Carr was where I would start. I didn't know what the Saints were getting at Derek Carr when he came in. It didn't follow him that closely with the Raiders. Certainly, his record with the Raiders wasn't that great. But from what I've seen from him since he's come here, he's almost exactly what this team needed. He's a veteran guy. He has really strong leadership qualities. All the intangibles were there to be the franchise quarterback. He gets what it takes to be in that role. But I wasn't sure how good he was going to be in the games. And what I saw in the game the other day, that's the difference in this team in the last 2 years is Derek Carr's ability. I mean, the first pass of the game he throws to Mike Thomas down the sidelines, can't throw a ball any better than that. I mean, if you go back and watch that pass, Mike Thomas really didn't do anything special. He just ran down the side. The defender was right on him.
Right.
And it fell right in his lap. He had to catch it. And then the last pass of the game to Rashid Shaheed to seal the game shows the confidence level that Dennis Allen and Pete Carmichael have in their quarterback to put the game on his shoulders, on his right arm, and seal that game throwing the ball through the air. That's something they couldn't do the last couple of years. That's a game they might not have won in past years, but they can with Derek Carr. And so I think it just elevates this team into a little bit of a different tier in the NFL right now. I don't want to get carried away. I mean, they only scored 16 points.
I get it.
Everyone's going a little crazy. And, they scored 16 points, only scored one touchdown. Right. Got to get better in the red zone. But it was still, I think, there's a lot of room for improvement, from him and the rest of the team.
Right, I would agree. And on the Carr situation, I'm like you. Again, I saw someday of Derek Carr, again with Oakland, Las Vegas, but really wasn't paying a lot of attention. The thing that stuck out to me, and Shuffleson mentioned on one of y'all programs this week, and I was taught in the game, and I wrote the same thing. The ability to make time with his feet, which is something, again, I didn't see when he was Las Vegas and Oakland. Again, he's not really a running quarterback, but again, feeling the rush, being able to, again, move a couple steps here or there to be able to get an open window, to be able to throw the football. It's a lot like what we used to see Breeze do here in New Orleans. And even, again, with Penning maybe having to get a little help, you could see him kind of maybe sliding a little bit more toward Ramczak's side. And I thought that really stuck out to me. Okay, great arm, accurate, and now the ability to feel the rush as well.
Yeah, I'll tell you, one of the biggest plays where that was on full exhibition was where he hit Chris Olave for about a 44-yard gain, I think it was. He had pressure from the left side. He just kind of climbed the pocket, a couple quick steps, climbed the pocket, and by that time Olave had gotten lost in the traffic and emerged. I mean, it was a huge play. They were backed up down near their own goal line. So those kind of plays, you turn what could be a potential loss into a 40-yard gain, and that's all with his savvy and his pocket awareness.
And calm in the pocket. Look, I'm not knocking Jameis Winston. I'm not knocking Dalton. But Jameis seemed to be a little bit antsy in the pocket. Dalton seemed to be a little bit slow on the trigger at times. There seemed to be a rhythm with him last week. Yeah,
and I tell you, the opposite of that was Ryan Tannehill.
Right.
I mean, Ryan Tannehill was scrambling into where he was seeing ghosts. I mean, and I would say this: as much as I was encouraged by the Saints, the one thing did pull away from that game is Ryan Tannehill was terrible in that game. He didn't play in the preseason. He looked like a guy that needed to have played. When the live bullets started flying, to use that cliche, I mean, he was ducking for cover,
Right.
and he had a couple of wide open receivers that an NFL quarterback has to hit.
Yes.
I mean, you don't get those opportunities very often. So that's what Dennis Allen's message to the team was on Monday was, hey, we got away with one here. We had too many coverage busts. As well as the defense played, there were opportunities there where a real quarterback would take advantage of it. So I came away encouraged but also cautious because I saw some things that they were very fortunate.
Right. Well, it starts with the offensive line, and you mentioned Tannehill being under pressure, and he was. Our offensive line gave up 8 tackles for losses, 8 quarterback hits, and 4 sacks. Yes, again, Penning did struggle, but there seemed to be across the line, all the linemen had their moments in that game. I understand, and I actually, our director, William Hill, and I were talking about this before the game, before the show today, that, again, that you're in a situation where the preseason, you don't play a lot, so you've got to get gelled, you've got to get some continuity. But that is a red flag. If they are going to win this year, they've got to keep Carr upright, and they've got to do a better job of protecting him. And look, the running the football, averaging about 2 yards a carry, you're not going to win doing that.
No, and that's a carryover from what we saw in the preseason.
Right.
They didn't run the ball well very much in the preseason, and they had problems blocking in the preseason. When they went out and worked against the Chargers, it was a carbon copy. The Chargers were all over Derek Carr. So look, I think it's a serious concern, and I think it's going to be an issue this week in Carolina. They have a good defensive front. So I think at least until Alvin Kamara gets back, a guy that can make people miss. They don't really have that element right now in the backfield. They're going to have to kind of manufacture yards on the ground, whether that's using Rashid Shaheed on jet sweeps, which we saw effectively against the Titans, and maybe Taysom Hill. Taysom Hill, that package, you could tell Tennessee was well prepared for that. They knew everything the Saints wanted to do out of that package. So Pete Carmichael and them may have to adjust a little bit there.
I agree. Be more diverse with the package, right? I mean, at this point, most teams know when he comes in, he's going to run. He's going to run maybe, again, student body left, student body right. Let him throw the ball, maybe a little bit. You got a lot of speed now with Shaheed and Olave, maybe an end around. Be a little bit more creative is what I would say with the Taysom Hill package.
Yeah, and they've done that in the past,
Right.
and I expect them to do it some more. In that game, though, you could just tell Tennessee was on top of it.
And they're a really good defense, though, right?
Yeah, and
that defensive line is really good.
And the other thing you have in an opener, you have extended amount to prepare. I mean, the Saints were working on the Titans 3 weeks ahead of the game.
Of course.
So the same thing probably from Tennessee's side. That won't be the case now. You only have a week, less time to prepare.
Yeah. Impressed the way they handled Derrick Henry. I mean, again, he's one of the toughest running backs in the NFL. There were 9 of his 15 carries were 3 yards or less. And again, earlier it looked like he was really gashing them, but they made some adjustments. And the defensive line, the play of the linebacker, especially Demario Davis, again, very impressive.
Yeah, I thought that was the key to the game for them defensively, because then they could really get after Tannehill. And as I mentioned, he just did not respond. I did think that the offensive game plan for Tennessee was a little questionable. I wasn't too thrilled with how they ran. I mean, they only ran, I think Derrick Henry only got 5 touches in the second half. I would have gone to him more often, and I would have gotten Tyjae Spears involved, maybe with some screens. I mean, a couple times they tried, and Tannehill just missed him. I mean, he was open, could have had some big gains. I think Spears is going to end up being a star for them, and I think they know that. I mean, he was heavily involved.
Yes, I agree.
I mean, he actually played more snaps, I think, than Henry. So, I'm kind of cautious about what I saw, just because there were opportunities there that weren't taken advantage of. But I would say this: the encouraging thing defensively was how many balls that the defensive secondary got their hands on. I think they had 11 pass breakups, 3 interceptions. That was something that really plagued them a year ago.
Right, agreed.
And for them to be able to make those plays, really they set up the Saints' offense throughout the second half with short fields.
Right. And then, of course, again, 3 times in the red zone, and they come away with no point, with no touchdowns.
Right. Great red zone defense. Yeah. And I thought that started on the very first drive after the fumbled kickoff. They set the tone. The Dome crowd had a big factor in that. I mean, that the 2 penalties right off the bat that gave them down and distance situations. But all in all, I think you have to come away encouraged. It's what I thought would happen. The game was played almost exactly the way I thought it was going to be, kind of a street fight, kind of ugly. And the Saints showed they can win a game, kind of playing the way the Titans wanted them to play. And I think the Saints have the ability and the flexibility to play differently, whereas Tennessee, they kind of have to play that way to win.
Saints signed Ruiz to an extension, so obviously they've now made a decision he's going to be their guard of the future there. Hurst started for Pete. where again Pete is now your backup. Penning again has some issues. They had to move Morrow over there to be able to help him in terms of chipping. Talk about the offensive line. Is it something that fans should just maybe take a wait and see approach, or is there red flags there?
Well, I didn't think Ruiz played very well at all in that game, but he was going against one of the best in the business,
Yes.
Jeffrey Simmons. They have a really strong defensive front. I don't think their defensive front is top 5 in the league, but it's definitely a top 10 defensive front. But no, they got to play better. I mean, they've got to run the ball better. I mean, Penning, we've talked about him, all of his pass protection, but he didn't run block that well in the game.
No, he didn't.
Either. They've got to get better up front. That's a real concern. Right now, I thought Ramczyk was probably the best offensive lineman. Even McCoy had some issues, and he's usually as reliable as it gets. And then, James Hurst is the better, I think, fallback option right now than Andres Pete. I'm not sure he's more physically talented than Pete, but he's someone that Doug Marrone can depend on. But, that line that 5 years ago was one of the best in the league is no longer, I think, in that equation.
Right. I would agree, and it'll be interesting to see what happens here going forward, because they put a lot of draft capital into both of their lines, no doubt about it. Talk about the running back situation. Williams, obviously, again, just kind of trying to churn out tough yards. You saw a little bit of Tony Jones. We did not see Kurt Merrick at all. Kamara's out for 2 more games. Talk about the back situation.
Yeah, well, I think people saw what Jamal Williams is in this game. I know a lot of people had high hopes because he led the league in rushing touchdowns. But if you know Jamal Williams, I mean, he's a 3 to 4 yard, going to get what's there kind of back.
Right.
He's not going to get much beyond that. He's going to get what the blocking dictates. Whereas Alvin Kamara can make turn a 4 yard gain into a 14 yard gain. That's what you're missing in the running game is that guy that can do that. Now, he's going to block well. He's going to pass protect. He's going to be in the right spots. He's a very reliable, dependable veteran back, but he's not a game breaker. He doesn't have that speed. So they're just going to have to make do until they get Kamara back. I mean, fortunately, they only have 2 more games where they have to deal with that. But it's 2 tough games here. Carolina on the road, then going up to Green Bay. And I wasn't sure what we were going to get with Green Bay. After watching them really easily dispatch of the Bears, that game looks a little more difficult. Both these games, by the way, Eric, are home openers. I mean, Green Bay plays their first 2 games on the road. So there'll be, hostile environments. I think the Saints, by winning this first game, though, now give themselves a little rope. They give themselves a little leash to, if they do trip up, come back home against Tampa in week 4, a team that you should be able to handle in the Dome. But getting back to the running game, I think they're going to have to manufacture yards until Alvin's back.
Yeah. And also, again, a little bit more confidence in terms of coming out with that game with a team that might be a playoff team in the AFC and getting that win. Wide receivers. I just felt like the speed on the field has really been upgraded than what we've seen in the past.
Yeah, well, Rashid Shaheed is a sprinter. I mean, we saw that. He ran right by Christian Fulton. He's a difference maker out there, and he's really refined himself as a receiver. He's no longer just a track guy playing football. You can see that he's becoming an emerging threat. And I think that's why, when I've written a lot about Michael Thomas, there's a lot of interest in Michael Thomas this preseason. We saw what Michael Thomas is going to be in this offense. It's exactly what I thought. He's going to make those tough, catches in the intermediate to short routes, move the chains kind of guy. I think he'll be involved when they get in the red zone more. He's a guy that I think Derek Carr trusts to come down with those competitive balls. But he's not going to be the number 1 receiver on this team. That's Chris Olave, and I think Rashid Shaheed and Juwan Johnson will be the second and third options. So Michael Thomas is going to probably do what we saw on Sunday, which is catch 5 to 7 balls a game, make some of those tough catches, and that's fine because his skill set complements the speed that they have in Olave and Rashid. I think the Saints are in really good shape right now with the receiving core. Those top 3 give them, I think, a lot of different skill sets, and also I think the trust that right now that Derek Carr has with all 3 of them is off the charts, and it's only going to get better.
And I would throw in again a lot of the young players that we saw in camp. That there's an upside there in the future for some of those guys they have on their practice squad, and a guy like A.T. Perry down the line. Receiver looks like it's going to be a really strong position for years to come. I want to talk a little bit about special teams, and again, going with the two young kickers, and again, Henley not young, but again, the two new kickers. He had a 52-yard punt, 48.7 yards on the day, and I thought, again, he did directional punting really well, getting, again, the Tennessee returners against the sidelines. And then Groupie, again, he was 3 for 3, 52-yard kick, 10 points. I thought both were outstanding, and I thought the coverage units were outstanding as well.
Yeah, no, special teams played a huge role in that game. The block punt, I mean, it didn't officially count as a block punt, but it set up a field goal, again, in a game that came down to 1 point, so that was critical. And yes, in their debuts under the bright lights, we didn't know how they would respond. Groupie and Headley, I thought, were fine. I mean, I didn't think Headley was particularly, great with any hang time. He has a weird kind of angle on his punts. They're very low trajectory, but they're effective. And he kicks with some side spin and some things. You could tell the Titans were prepared for that, though. They were very much watching that ball all the way into the catch. It'll be interesting to see how they perform on Monday night in a different road environment, but early signs were positive.
I think it was 7 penalties, 45 yards. One of the things I really keyed on going into the season was discipline. Not beating yourselves like you did last year in a lot of cases, last 2 years. Again, missed assignments. How do you think they did?
I thought they were fine. I mean, they're always going to have defensive holding and pass interference penalties. That's the way they play.
Aggressive.
They're always going to get those, and I know it frustrates Saints fans, but that's the trade-off. That's the cost of doing business the way the Saints play. If you notice, there's lots of times where they're not getting a ton of pressure up front, but they end up getting there eventually because they're rerouting the receivers in the passing attack, and it's giving them a little extra time to get there. That's the way the Saints play defense. And when they play against officiating crews that call it tight, they're going to have to adjust. But this crew the other night let them play. I know that fans were upset about the long pass to Olave where it looked like there was interference, but if you go back and watch, there was very similar contact on the interception that Ike Yadam tipped.
Yes.
Very similar. They let them play downfield. As long as you're consistent, you can't complain.
That's what the Saints want. They want a crew that's going to allow them to be physical.
Yeah, I compare it often to a basketball team that hand checks throughout the game. That's the way Rick Pitino's teams always played, and they're like, well, they're not going to call it because they want the flow of the game to keep going. They're not going to call it every time. So we'll put up with 1 or 2 calls a game. We think in the long run we'll come out ahead.
You mentioned red zone offense. Didn't see a lot of Jimmy Graham. I was surprised by that. Again, look, Johnson's done a great job at tight end, but he's just such a weapon in the red zone. Do you think that's something that will change going forward?
Yeah, no, I think he'll be involved. I think that's going to be one of his main roles.
Yeah, me too.
In the red zone, and yeah, they've got to get better in the red zone. That was one of the knocks on Derek Carr when he came here. His red zone efficiency was among the worst in the league. Didn't get off to a great start there. A lot of that can be play calling. I think they also had a couple of penalties when they got down there. And they did have some pre-snap penalties that hurt this team a year ago. They led the league in false start penalties. But on the other side, I think Tennessee had 4 false start penalties.
Yeah, the dome crowd was
That's the dome, and the dome was electric in that opener. I think played a big role.
Right. 3 sacks, 10 quarterback hits, 3 interceptions for the defense. Again, I thought Dennis Allen last year at times was maybe a little bit overwhelmed having to be the play caller on defense on game day and then all the head coach. I thought he was on it on Sunday. And as was Carmichael. I thought he caught a good game as well.
Yeah, I agree. I think they got after Tennessee up front. The one question I have there, and again, I don't want to always sound like the wet blanket here, but I don't know how good Tennessee's offensive line is. I mean, I think that's a work in progress.
Well, yeah, they totally changed for 2 years ago.
Right, and I don't. If you just go man-to-man across that line, I'm not seeing any Pro Bowlers up there.
Yeah.
And the Saints got after him. Carl Granderson got after him. They did. I thought they had some really creative games that they played up front with the tackle and end stunts and things like that caused problems. But again, keep going back to Tannehill. Tannehill was so bad, it was hard for me to truly evaluate it because he just looked like a deer in headlights for a 10-year veteran. I was shocked at how overwhelmed he looked and how he missed some really easy plays. So I want to see how Bryce Young does against this. I think it's going to be interesting. I've done some research, a little sneak peek to my column this weekend, but like the Saints traditionally against rookie quarterbacks under Dennis Allen have really cause problems for
Yeah.
them. I think they're 10-1 overall. The only loss they had was Jalen Hurts 2 years ago, and that was a close game. But otherwise, it's very rarely do you see a rookie quarterback play well.
Jeff, that's a great point. I've talked about it when you look at the list of quarterbacks that are going to be taken on this year, again, like I've said before, it's not a murderer's row. I think that you can be encouraged by that, and of course the number of games they'll be playing indoors. But Tannehill, in past games, has been a guy that's been on the move. They kept him in the pocket, and that's going to be a key on Monday night with Bryce Young. You've got to be able to keep him in the pocket.
Yeah, Bryce Young is very elusive. I mean, he's got really good pocket presence. And look, he threw some bad picks. Jesse Bates, the old veteran safety, picked him off twice. Those are going to be learning experiences, part of the process of becoming an NFL quarterback, going through those growing pains. But he's a dangerous player. He's very accurate, and I think he will be more of a threat to run and at least run and move the chains. Help get first downs out of that offense because they're very limited on the perimeter. I don't know how Carolina's going to win on the perimeter against the Saints secondary. They're going to have to do some things. I've seen them do it in the past where they'll, maybe throw a flea flicker in or have a halfback option pass, just something to surprise the Saints to try and manufacture some points.
Yeah. I got to go through this again. I've done it a couple times on this show through a few weeks. I do on the radio show. Ryan Tannehill, W this week. Bryce Young, then Jordan Love, then Baker Mayfield, then Mac Jones, C.J. Stroud or Dalton, depending on where they are. Then Trevor Lawrence might be the best quarterback they're going to face this year. Anthony Richardson, Justin Fields, Kirk Cousins, Desmond Ridder, Jared Goff, Bryce Young, Daniel Jones, Matt Stafford, Baker Mayfield, Desmond Ridder. I mean, you talk about, again, Dennis Allen and as a tactician and the ability to go after a quarterback. This is not, again, Burrow and Mahomes at all.
No, as a matter of fact, when I looked at it last week, I think the top 8 quarterbacks in the league by most rating systems or power rankings of quarterbacks, the Saints don't play any of them.
Right.
And their strength of their defense is their pass defense.
Yes.
So they should really, I think they could easily set some club records this year with their pass defense efficiency. We already saw that. I mean, Ryan Tannehill had the lowest passer rating of his career.
Yes.
28.8 passer rating. I think very similar. We could see this week to week.
Well, talk about this Monday night national TV, Saints and Panthers.
Well, I think it's a very dangerous game. This is a game I picked Carolina to win before the season, and I still think they can win this game. I mean, I think they're going to be a very desperate team coming in 0-1, having lost their opener. You're going to have a home crowd environment. It's Monday Night Football. Bryce Young's home debut. There's just all these intangibles. I think the key for the Saints is going to be to match the intensity that they're surely going to have to face against Carolina. They're going to come out amped up. The Saints a little fat and happy after winning their opener. Have been told how great they are all week. It's very dangerous, and we see it every year, Eric. Every year, how the NFL, the week 1 losers usually come back and win. The week 1 winners usually have a drop off. I mean, it's just human nature. So I think it's a very dangerous game.
Yeah. Jeff Duncan, New Orleans Times-Picayune columnist, also the advocate, NOLA.com, and of course Fox 8 contributor is with us today. I'm Eric Asher. We'll take a quick break, hear from our underwriters. We'll come back. We'll talk LSU, Tulane, and if we have time, we'll jump into the Pels as well. You're watching Inside New Orleans Sports. Stay tuned.
Burkhart's Air Conditioning, Heating, and Refrigeration has been family-owned and operated since 1989. Burkhart has energy-efficient solutions and offers brands such as Mitsubishi ductless AC units and Amana, the only manufacturer with a lifetime unit replacement warranty. Burkhart's offers maintenance bundle packages that include servicing your AC, generator, and tankless water heater. For more information on the services Burkhart's provides, visit acpromise.com. Burkhart's Air Conditioning, Heating, and Refrigeration, providing comfort for life.
Located at 3701 Iberville Street in Mid-City is Katie's Restaurant and Bar. Open 7 days a week, Katie's offers daily specials for lunch, dinner, and Sunday brunch. Serving New Orleans cuisine such as fried shrimp platters, grilled redfish, and a fully stocked bar. And don't forget about our expanded event seating and local entertainment. Featured on the Best of Food Network's diners, drive-ins, and dives, Katie's Restaurant and Bar.
Acadian Custom Shutters is locally owned and operated, specializing in interior and exterior shutters and window coverings, as well as awnings and patio covers. Acadian Custom Shutters offers American products with personal service and workmanship, serving the South Shore, North Shore, and Mississippi Gulf Coast. More information is available at 985-893-3119 or AcadianCustomShutters.com.
Welcome back to Inside New Orleans Sports. I'm your host, Eric Asher. Jeff Duncan of the Picayune and also Fox 8 Sports is our guest. Jeff, take a little water here. I'll get you set up here.
Thank you.
LSU with a 72-10 win over Grambling. I think the score is not indicative of what we saw if you really want to kind of drill down with the team. And the thing that really stuck out to me, Jeff, was the defensive line, which has been vaunted all off season long, the inability to stop Grambling's running game. And Sheldon Mickles wrote this in his column this week. First 3 drives, 83, 80, 69, 8.3 yards per play for Grambling against LSU's defensive line. That's with Smith there, and that's with Perkins there, right, and Wingo. And then, of course, the only sack they got on Grambling, late third quarter, Jordan Jefferson gets a sack. That, to me, is a red flag. Yeah, big concern. I agree. And they're getting ready to run into a stretch here where they play 5 straight, I think, SEC opponents. And SEC games always been won in the trenches. That's where you win the games. I thought they got outplayed in the trenches by Florida State, which is there's no disrespect there. I mean, Florida State's got a lot of NFL draft picks on both sides of the line. But you have to play better against Grambling in that regard. And to me, that's a concern. I'm sure it's what Brian Kelly and his staff have been working on all week. This game's going to be very tricky. Starkville, I've covered a bunch of games there, man. That place can be a snake pit. State, I think, doesn't have the talent of LSU, but the levels of the playing field when you play on the road in an environment like that's going to be hot. And I think depth, and depth will be, tested because you're going to have depth in the fourth quarter in a hot environment like that. Right. That's been the really kind of the thing that's really kind of thrown me off a bit about this team, because when you look at the depth chart, when you look at offense and defense, you would think that the defense was going to carry this team, especially again with, what they did last year on the defensive line, the return of Mason Smith, Wingo, who again was a second or third team All-American, and then of course Perkins. It almost feels like they haven't figured out how to utilize Perkins once again. Talk about the defense, the front seven, and how they played so far, and what do you anticipate going forward? Well, I think it's a good point. I mean, I know the Perkins situation's, had a lot of interest from fans wondering how he's being played. I think it's pretty clear that they're trying to get him ready for the NFL while working him into the concept of what will help the LSU defense. This is part of being a modern college football coach at a high level when you get these elite players like Harold Perkins. I mean, he's not that big. He's 6'1", 220. Right. He's going to play linebacker in the NFL. He's not going to be rushing the quarterback. So that's probably the conversation that's been going on. But he's so effective in the college level, I think they've got to start using him more. But he has a weapon, right, Jeff? I mean, look, Jeff, I said this last week. You don't take Lawrence Taylor and make him into Mike Singletary. But at the same time, if you got a guy like that that's going to draw that type of attention with, again, the defensive line was supposed to draw attention, moving him all over and making the offense adjust is what you want, again, play to play. Right, but you also have to realize that he's probably got other interests involved, which is showing NFL scouts and coaches that he can play linebacker and drop into coverage. That's where he's going to play at the next level. So you're trying to balance that. He's been lost there. He's trying to balance it. I mean, that's what they're trying to do, and I'm sure Kelly's trying to find out what's the balance that serves the team while also taking care of an elite player who wants to play at the next level. Obviously, that is the modern, the modern challenge of. At the highest level. Nick Saban's talked about this before at Alabama, so it's not unusual. But I do think defensively they've got to improve. Look, I think if you listen closely to Brian Kelly in his press conferences leading up to the Florida State game, he was trying to temper enthusiasm a little bit. He was trying to let people know lower expectations a little bit here, because we're still a year or so away of developing the depth we need to challenge the big boys in the SEC. Yeah. This defensive line, in order for them to be successful, especially again with the real unknowns in the defensive backfield, they've got to be able to put pressure on the passer, and they have not done that consistently.
No, and that's an area where I think we all knew could be a problem area. I mean, there's a reason they're using the transfer portal so heavily on the secondary, and sometimes it pans out and you strike gold, and sometimes you don't. I think we're seeing that's what I think Brian Kelly's trying to tell the fans is it shouldn't be at the SEC level, at the LSU level. Elite programs shouldn't have to go out and restock their secondary with the transfer portal. That's something you want to use maybe. Yeah, I mean, you want to develop through your recruiting, and then maybe you plug a hole, not overhaul most of the whole secondary. So it just shows you how far down the program was before you got there.
Well, and look, and a lot of people, again, the expectations are so much higher because of what happened last year, but people do forget about, again, the Texas poll and John J. Kirkland playing quarterback, and again, having almost no scholarship players. And if you look at this team and you look at the depth chart, again, look, and I know this across the board with a lot of teams in college football now, but littered with the transfer portal to the point that, again, that in some positions, more transfer portal players than players that, again, that you're bringing in from high school that you're developing.
Well, and that's just how the game's going to be in the future. But a program like LSU should be a destination program and will be a destination program. So I think they're going to have players coming in only to help at certain positions. They're not. I don't think they're going to lose a lot because it's such. Kids want to play at LSU. I mean, it's difficult to not recruit well at LSU. You have to really fail. And I think what in some ways what happened last year at LSU reminds me a little bit of what happened with Sean Payton and Drew Brees in their first year, where they kind of overachieved, I think, and created false expectations. And we know what happened after that. They went 8-8 and 7-9. They really weren't that talented. And Sean Payton will tell you, we weren't that good, but we rode emotion post-Katrina, the block punt. Next thing we know, we were 3-0, and they were like a 500 team the rest of the year. But they were in a down in NFC that year. I think that's kind of what Brian Kelly's trying to tell people is like we kind of overachieved last year, but we're really not that far along. And maybe in some ways it was detrimental because it created false hopes.
Yeah, and look, especially when you got two other programs that are on the campus that won national championships in the second year, right? Automatically everybody thinks it's going to do it in football as well. Offensive line. It looks like, again, that they may be making some changes, moving Hurd to the outside, moving E inside, and at the guard position. Your thoughts?
Yeah, look, I think tackle's fine. I think they know they got talent there. Interior's still a work in progress, and I think Brian Kelly hinted at that in preseason that could be changing throughout the season. But I think their line's going to be fine. I mean, I think it's going to end up being a strength of this team. And that's where this offense is going to be made or break. That offensive line. I think we know they've got the Jaden Daniels, the perimeter players to be effective, but they've got to be able to hold up. And I think he's trying to get this taken care of before this big SEC stretch. They've got to get it figured out before they get into this run.
Diggs really showed, again, had that kind of SEC type back.
Yes.
As did Jackson, again, and limited. He's going up against the scrubs of Grambling, but again, he showed something as well. A lot better than what we saw against Florida State the week before. And just in terms of, again, the ability of the backs to be able to make yards on their own.
Yeah, and I think that's going to be critical against State. They've got to be able to run the ball. And I think this is another area. He's trying to find out who's his lead dog in the backfield. And I think Diggs right now is the guy. But you've got to be able to run. You can't just put too much on Jaden Daniels in that passing attack. And it's been hit or miss, I think, frankly, the last year or so with the running game. They don't really have that bell cow back. That guy. We thought John Emery might be. Maybe he develops into that. Certainly was recruited to be that.
Sure.
But we just haven't seen it.
And Williams has been steady, but you need a spectacular back in the SEC. It'll be interesting to see how it plays out. The one thing that really has stuck out to me is the wide receiving core, which again was a lot was expected. The drop passes.
Yeah, they dropped a lot. I know, and I think that's a product of just not practicing as much as we've seen in the past. I mean, we saw Florida State drop a lot of balls against LSU as well. So I think it's not uncommon. I've seen it all over college football. But you're right. There's a lot of talent in that receiving core, and I think expectations are higher that they're going to be able to make those plays. And I think they will. Each week, I think that'll get better.
SEC gauntlet coming up for them. Again, Mississippi State morning game, 11 a.m. As you mentioned in Starkville. Talk about, and this is a different Mississippi State team. It's funny because I started the week this week talking about Mississippi State a little bit, and I had to go back and do some scouting. Right, we're so used to the air raid offense. They're a different team now. They're running the football. Rodgers, who threw the ball so much last year, I think threw 17 times last week. They have now gone back to the old Mississippi State, where again they want to pound you again with a running game.
I think it's reflective of the head coach, right? He's defensive coordinator, similar to what transition we're seeing with Dennis Allen taking over for Sean Payton. It's more of a defensive-oriented team. But I do think, as much as fans were disappointed with that loss to Florida State, things have changed in the last week, right? We've seen Texas A&M get beat. We saw Alabama get beat. I went to that Ole Miss-Tulane game, and I know we're going to talk Tulane, but those were two very even teams. If you were at that game, there was no difference in the talent level between those two teams. Matter of fact, I think if Michael Pratt plays, Tulane wins that game. I don't think there was any doubt about it. So if you're LSU, you're upset you lost that opener, but you look at the SEC West, it's wide open. They have every bit of, in my opinion, should be maybe even considered the favorites to win it. So you can feel good about where you're at, knowing that the talent at some of these other programs, or at least the performance, has not been any better than your school.
Something to prove this week for this team. Again, especially after Florida State, and really not really showing up against Grambling as a lot of people, because the score is not indicative, again, how close that game was early, no doubt. Let's go to Tulane. Before getting into the game, I want to talk a little bit about, you got a great relationship with Troy Dannon, and what he is doing now to really catapult this program to the next level. We've seen the new turf in the stadium.
Yeah, it looks great.
Okay, with the locker room, the upgrade there. We know the Fear the Wave initiative, again, with the NIL, which really kept Michael Pratt in the fold this year. Again, now the plans to have the on-campus training facility, indoor facility. All these things are huge for the future of Tulane athletics, not just football, but athletics as a whole. Talk a bit about it.
Well, look, I think it starts with Willie Fritz and the stability that he's brought to the program. It starts there. You have to win, and then once keeping him on board last year was, look, he was almost out the door to Georgia Tech.
This just doesn't happen at Tulane, right?
Right.
I mean, it's a stepping stone.
But what that enabled them to do was that stability by, you don't think you get Greg McMahon or Dan Rochar to come in. These are NFL coaches on the staff now. They're willing to do that because it's a great culture, it's a great environment that Willie Fritz has created, and they know there's stability there. If you have a revolving door, and look, Willie Fritz might leave next year, who knows? I mean, but they've created enough stability to where now it's considered a good program. They're going to attract good candidates. And that's what you want. It reminds me a little bit of, like, say, Gonzaga basketball. When they got it rolling out there, it was perceived as a mid-major, and they kept having success, they kept getting good coaches to want to coach there. That's what you want to do at Tulane for the football program. And I think they've done that, and you're right. It's elevated what I was impressed with on Saturday, not only the environment, I mean, it felt like an SEC game, but also just the talent level in the lines. Usually that's where the SEC teams will overpower you. That did not happen in this game. Tulane stood toe-to-toe. They ran the ball well on Ole Miss. They stopped the run. I think they would have won that game. I know that it got away from them there at the end with the fluky play, but even with their backup quarterback, they gave Ole Miss all they could handle.
I agree with everything you just said, and talked about it this week. You look at the line. The first thing I noticed was when they went up against Ole Miss was the size factor. The offensive line, defensive line. These are SEC lines Tulane has, and then they have SEC speed on the outside.
Very much.
Okay. You look at the quarterback position, an SEC quarterback, okay? There's no doubt he could play in the SEC. And now, again, you look at the running back position, and you say with Hughes, that might be a guy that, that can carry the load for them.
That running back is special.
He's really
is. Be really good.
I mean, the falling forward. Now, again, they lost Corey Platt. That's going to hurt. But, again, I mean, Small comes in, Machado, Grubbs at the linebacker position. They didn't miss a beat there. And, so on the second level, and even I was impressed with again, the secondary of Tulane. Again, the playmakers on the back end, there was a lot of question marks about the corners, but I thought they played well on all three levels on defense.
Yeah, and they lost a lot. I mean, they lost a lot on that defense. So that was the question everybody had. They lost defense coordinator to Oregon. So they had a lot to replace there, and they really haven't skipped a beat. Now, this is a dangerous game we all know this week, Southern Miss, we don't know Pratt's status. I don't know if he's going to play or not. They're saying it's a game time decision. Right. But Horton has played well. I think in the second half he'd probably like to have some throws back against Ole Miss, but they will certainly have Tulane's attention after what happened last year. They're not going to overlook, and Will Hall knows Tulane's program up and down,
yes,
so
does.
he has
those quarterbacks too.
Yes, very much. So it's going to be a difficult game, and they're going to be a desperate team. I think they're 0-2, right? Have they lost both their games? I think
so.
But point is, they're going to definitely be laying in wait for Tulane. This is a game you got to get through,
right?
And if they can get through it, and I think the decision to rest Pratt was the right one. If you think about it, and someone with Tulane brought this point up to me, the difference between being, say you aspire to go 12-0, right? If they manage to end up 11-1, that loss is not going to affect them in any way.
It's a good loss.
Yeah, every voter is going to look at that and say they were playing without their starting quarterback. They lost to an SEC team. They were in the game the whole way.
Right.
It's really going to have no effect at all on their end of season ranking.
I'm with you. That defense, they held Judkins to 48 yards on 18 carries. They had I think Ole Miss was 1 for 13 on third downs.
Right.
I mean, across the board, they really played well.
Yeah, they got after Dart too.
They really did.
I mean, they
had
were
41 yards rushing, but that was running away from the defense,
they were
right?
Tons of pressure on him, getting into the backfield, showing that, and it wasn't just one or two guys; it was across the board. So I was really impressed with what Tulane did, and I think anybody that was there, including the Ole Miss people that I was talking to in the press box, came away from that feeling. And Lane Kiffin had really strong things to say about Tulane. I mean, it just showed you that last year, it validated what happened last year, that this team is not going away. It wasn't a one-year wonder where there's a magic carpet ride and things fell into place. No, they're going to be sticking around as long as Willie Fritz is there.
Yeah, I agree.
And that staff, they're going to be, I think the favorites in their conference to win.
Horton did not play. Look, we keep talking about Pratt, and I agree with you. The first thing I thought when I walked away from that game was, man, Pratt plays, they win. But I mean, Horton was 15 for 37, 231. He had an interception, a touchdown, and a fumble. The interception, the fumbles were big. But again, I thought he played a pretty good game. He just isn't Pratt. He doesn't have Pratt's athletic ability, and of course, again, his command of the offense as well. Yeah,
look, you can't lose a guy with the experience of Michael Pratt and all the big games he's played in, and this is a talented guy. I mean, I'm starting to hear from NFL scouts. I mean, he's going to get drafted. And there's a lot of teams that are showing interest in him right now. So I don't think there's any doubt that he's a difference maker for them and gives them a puncher's chance to be able to compete with the SEC schools and the big programs on their schedule.
Now, again, this is the non-conference game against a rival in Southern Miss. And then you're going to get into conference play. And, of course, the big one is at the end of the season, Texas San Antonio. Not that you're looking that far ahead. But, again, this is where they can really pick up, again, some wins down the line here and get back into the top 25 and still have an opportunity to be able to get into, again, a New Year's Six Bowl. You get the 2 losses, and that's kind of tough depending on what happens again with again the rest of the group of 5. But your thoughts on the season for this team, because I think that again it's still, even with the loss to Ole Miss, it's wide open.
Yeah, well, I think playing the long game with Pratt is what you have to do.
Agreed.
You've got to get him healthy and have him back. I mean, I know he was gimpy with his knee. They didn't feel like there was enough stability there. Get him healthy, whatever you got to do, because you need him in the long run.
Yeah.
I'm with you, but I think they can win these games without him. I mean, I think they're talented enough in other areas. I mean, they have great skill position players. I think the running back is a reveation. I didn't know much about him until that game, and I was telling some of the Tulane folks, I said, "You found your running back."
Yeah.
I mean, this guy can be.
Well, he can play.
He can be your your workhorse in the backfield.
And we got Shotty Clayton Johnson again, who played well. And look, Arnold Barnes got some carries last week as well. I know they're really high on the kid out of Booker T. I want to. With that said, Tulane traveling to USM. Your thoughts?
Well, it's a dangerous game. We learned that last year where Southern Miss was able to beat Tulane. They're going to be desperate. Tulane, though, I think will certainly not overlook them. We know from what happened last year, and having lost this past week, I think they're going to be all in. I think they flipped the script and just get out of there with a win. That's the key to this game, because if you look at the schedule, they get Nichols after that. So if they could get through this even without Pratt, they can handle Nichols. Obviously, they should. and then you could maybe get Pratt back healthy for that run.
Yeah. I want to stay with college football for just a moment and step outside of Louisiana, just because, again, it's the talk of the country right now, and that's Colorado and what Deion Sanders is doing.
Yeah, remarkable. I did not expect this
Neither did I.
at all, especially the turnover on the roster.
Right.
I thought it would take him time. He's obviously put together a very good staff. You watch their offense is spectacular. Their offensive coordinator, Lewis, I think is his name, is not going to be there very long. He's going to get a head coaching job. And Shedeur Sanders is a legit first-round draft pick talent. So they've got some talent there. Now, look, they've beaten TCU, who I think is going to be down. I don't think there's any doubt. They kind of got exposed against Georgia, and we're seeing that now. They showed up against Nebraska, a team that I think clearly also has some limitations. We'll see where they go from here. But early on, what he's done has transformed the perception of the program.
Yes.
Changed the image of Colorado football now to where kids all over the country are starting to pay attention to Colorado.
Right.
And look, I can remember, I'll take you back in my early days of journalism. My first jobs were up in Monroe, Louisiana, covering Northeast Louisiana. When they made the move to Division 1A football from 1AA, their first ever game was at Boulder. I remember it was Rashawn Salam. Remember them?
Yeah.
They were number 3 in the country. It's a funny story, Eric. Colorado fumbles the opening drive, like the second play of the game. They fumble. NLU recovers it. They stall. They kick a field goal. They're up 3-0 in their first game against the number 3 team in the country. The sports information staff took a photo of the scoreboard. We're beating the Buffaloes 3-0. I think they ended up losing 51-3, but it didn't matter. They were up 3-0. But what I'm getting at is that's a spectacular place. For a college student to want to go play football. Spectacular campus. And the way he's got things going there, I think they're going to be a factor of recruiting nationally.
And to your point, the turnover in the roster and to be ready to go right out the box has been phenomenal. Look, I followed him a little bit at Jackson State. Didn't think again he would have immediate success at Colorado. He has done it, and again, tip of the cap.
Yes, very impressive.
Right.
It's not easy to do what he's doing to coordinate all that with all these new moving parts. So yeah, I think he deserves all the plaudits he's getting, and I think they're going to be a factor.
Let's talk Pels. First of all, it starts and ends with Zion Williamson, and again, everybody's been seeing the videos and the pictures. A healthy, in-shape Zion Williamson is a real plus for this team going into the season.
Yeah, look, I think he's got a little bit of a chip on his shoulder, which I think is a good thing. This past season was not what he wanted, and I think has received some maybe for the first time in his career, some really legit, valid criticism. And so I think it's affected him in a good way. Positively, we're seeing him come back in shape, and he is the bell cow there. This is his team. I know David Griffin will say differently. It is the team will go as far as Zion Williamson takes them.
Agreed.
He's got to be the guy. Brandon Ingram, I think, is a perfect Robin to his Batman. But losing Trey Murphy, when you and I have talked about this, it's a big blow. I mean, it hurts their outside shooting. Their perimeter shooting is something they were concerned about. They've got to find a way to supplement that because we know the way Zion plays, attacking the rim, they have to have wing shooters.
Yeah, no doubt. Now again, Will Barton is visiting today. Pels are going to be in a luxury tax luxury tax threshold. Be interesting to see how they deal with that. But it could be 10 to 12 weeks with Trey Murphy, and then there's the ramp-up period. So again, you're talking about in season now, where he's going to miss some time with again that surgically repaired torn meniscus.
Yeah, and look, this is a big year for the organization.
Yes.
I mean, there are going to be no more mulligans. I mean,
agreed.
David Griffin, his staff know that. Willie Green, I think, starts to fall under scrutiny if they can't get it done. So there's a lot on the line. And look, organizationally, just thinking down the road, long term, we've heard them talk about trying to get maybe a new arena built. They're not going to get any political momentum in Baton Rouge until they win.
Yes.
It all starts with them winning, getting into the playoffs, getting excitement. And so they're thinking, and I say they, the organizational leaders, management, ownership, long term. Where's this organization going to be 5-10 years from now? Well, it starts with winning now, becoming a playoff team. The roster is talented enough to be a playoff team every year. It's got to translate on the court, so then they can start trying to take care long term. Because this organization, I think right now, anybody would tell you that the Smoothie King Center's maybe the worst or one of the worst arenas in the league in terms of relative comparisons.
The commissioners kind of said it, right?
Correct.
I mean, when the commissioner comes out and talks about there needs to be upgrades or needs to be a new arena, you better perk up and listen. And look, this that when you talk about the hierarchy on Airline Drive, they know the recipe, right? They know the recipe of Baton Rouge. They know how to get the money, and then get the money, you have to win. Look at the difference on the Saints in terms of, again, the upgrade of that building there, getting ready for the Super Bowl. Camp starts October 3rd. The first preseason game is October 10th. Valanciunas played very, very well in the World Cup. There's been a lot of talk about trying to move off of him and possibly going with a more athletic center. Your thoughts? Yeah,
well, that's, I think, the way Willie Green would like to play. He'd like to play with a different type of big man than JV, but I don't think they tried all offseason. They couldn't move.
Couldn't get it done.
I think it could still happen, but it's not going to happen until probably the trade deadline now. But we'll see if this team's having success on the court, which I fully expect them to. But look, the West has gotten much more difficult from a year ago. I mean, there's been a lot of talent come into the West. They've fortified. I don't think they can just afford to sit on their laurels, and I think they know that. And so that's why I think we're going to continue to see David Griffin work the trade market.
And I do agree with you when you say that there is a little bit of a hot seat here for David Griffin and really the organization as a whole, because you have to take that next step. Now, again, a lot of it is being snake bitten by injuries over the last few years, but that excuse only goes so far.
Right, and I think one good thing I would say, David Griffin after the season and Willie Green both, hey, we're not using these excuses anymore. They know that. They understand. Look, the organization's made a ton of investment into that side of the building. They needed it. It needed it to be able to compete.
Agreed.
But there's some challenges here. This isn't like the NFL business model where there's great revenue sharing. I mean, the local TV revenues is a issue for the Oklahoma Cities, the New Orleans of the world. They can't make up the $100 million disparity between the Los Angeles Lakers and the Golden State Warriors. They need the league to really reconsider breaking that business model and doing more revenue sharing.
More NFL. Because again, and I agree with you, the ability to be able to pay yourself into the luxury tax and pay the tax has not paid dividends for the small markets.
No.
You get the money, but again, at the end of the day, you're still not able to be able to put together an all-star lineup of players going over the tax. And
to get back to the TV thing, I mean, I know fans are frustrated, and rightfully so, because it's almost impossible to watch games locally. But the Pelicans are in such dire straits trying to compete with their peers. With this local TV revenue, they have to take what they could get. And that was the best deal they could get right now. Otherwise, they'd be even worse shape financially. So it's a real problem they have to get solved. And I say they, the NBA, to make it viable for these small markets to compete with these big markets.
That's why I wonder if they're really going to go over the luxury tax threshold when you start looking at the business model. No doubt.
It needs to be answered.
No doubt. Jeff, thanks for the time as always. Jeff Duncan, Times-Picayune, NOLA.com, The Advocate, and also, again, Fox 8 Sports. All right, thanks so much for tuning in. Remember, there are so many ways to catch our program now. There's a QR code on your screen. Just click the QR code on your screen. It'll take you either to the WLAE-TV YouTube channel, where you can always catch the program, or again to my website, where it's always posted. Also, remember, again, set your DVR for your favorite time slot. You'll never miss the program. So many rebroadcasts of our program available for you on WLAE-TV, WLAE-TV2, and also Pelican Sports Television. You catch me on the radio, 106.1 FM. That is 4 to 6 weekdays. You can listen live at ericasher.com. Also, the iHeartRadio app, the TuneIn Radio app, our digital platforms. You can also, again, catch us on our podcast, which is on the Apple Spotify app. We're on all podcasting platforms. Just search Inside New Orleans Show with Eric Asher, and you'll find that very easily. Also, once again, I want to thank our underwriters who make our show possible. Each and every one of those underwriters that have been with us, we appreciate each and every one of them. We appreciate you supporting those underwriters. That's how this program stays on the air. We want to thank, again, everybody here at WLAE-TV who help put on this program each and every week. Ron Riega, Jim Dotson, Logan Graffia, also, again, Danielle Wick. Can't forget about Alex Chacon and our director, William Hill. For Jeff Duncan, I'm Eric Asher. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you next week for another edition of Inside New Orleans Sports.